Well, you yourself said that the coup was one of the main stages that ultimately led us all to the situation we are watching right now. And of course, this coup was stimulated and supported by Western countries. After that, for many years, we warned that you cannot treat Russian people this way. People who have lived their entire lives on the lands that, under Soviet rule, ended up within the Ukrainian state. You cannot, under any circumstances, involve this territory, which Russians have developed for centuries, in NATO. We warned about this for a long time. But the West nurtured and raised neo-Nazis and clearly continued to support them as a tool in the war against the Russian Federation. It's obvious to anyone with even a minimal understanding of what's happening that justice is on our side. Justice lies in every person's right to be who they were raised to be and who they want to be. But I repeat, the use of the Ukrainian neo-Nazi regime as a tool in the fight against Russia has, of course, alarmed the global majority, the countries of the global South, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Because everyone began to think, who will Washington target next? Who might displease Washington the next time? Anyone could be next. In this sense, you are absolutely right. Of course, the special military operation has global significance because it defends a multipolar world order, where all countries, without exception, are equal. Let me remind you once again of the UN Charter, which states that the United Nations is based on the sovereign equality of states. This principle has never, in any situation, been respected or observed by the US or its satellites. And of course, the global majority is interested in ending the current state of affairs when the Americans demand that everyone respect not international law, but a rules-based order. And their rules are, as we say, made up on the spot. When they needed to sever Kosovo from Serbia, they simply declared its independence without any referendum and called it the realization of the right of peoples to self-determination. And when, a few years later, after the Nazis seized power in Kiev, the people of Crimea held a referendum and, in the presence of many foreign observers, voted for reunification with Russia, the Americans condemned this action and said it violated territorial integrity. You see, it's very clear to everyone, to most of my interlocutors from Africa, Asia, and Latin America, what this is all about. It's about the fact that the US wants to prove to everyone that they are the hegemon, and no one dares to contradict them. Whatever they want, they expect to get. And that's why the US talks about inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield. They see it as an existential threat, a threat to their hegemony. And if, in this situation, the truth prevails, and it will definitely prevail, they will see it as their defeat, as a loss of their reputation, their authority, and the fear that many have of them. Escalation? No, we don't want any escalation. You are absolutely right. They are playing. And it feels like they indeed have the mentality of a child. Although these are grown men, important figures, ministers, prime ministers, chancellors, presidents, and so on. They have been discussing for several months that Russia is only making threats and talking about red lines. But the West crosses those red lines every time, and nothing happens. I think President Putin recently commented on this situation during his speech in St. Petersburg, especially regarding various initiatives to provide Ukraine with American, French, and British weapons and allow it to strike any target on Russian territory. This would mean direct NATO war against Russia. At least in Washington, there are some reasonable people who understand this. Right now, NATO is waging a war against Russia, but it's a hybrid war through the hands of Ukrainians. If we are talking about long-range missiles, it is clear that the Ukrainians themselves will not be able to use them. Targeting, satellite data, and flight assignments can only be handled by specialists from the country that produces these weapons. As for what you asked about regarding strategic defeat on the battlefield, I am not worried. Well, I don't want to specifically quote some Western politicians. There are people in the United States and Europe who have studied and remembered history well. Both Napoleon and Hitler tried to defeat us strategically. By the way, both gathered more than half of the European countries under their banners, which obediently submitted, were captured, and handed over their military forces to the command of Bonaparte and Adolf Schicklgruber, Hitler. And they all ended in disaster. Those who read and know history understand this very well. Now, just like during the Second World War, the entire coalition under the Americans, about 50 countries, is fighting against us through the hands of the Ukrainian regime, which, like Hitler's regime, is openly Nazi. In such situations, no one should forget the character of the Russian people. This character is now being displayed on the front lines. All attempts to destabilize our society always lead to the opposite result. Our society is now more united than ever, and we see no other option but to defeat the Nazis once again, who have attacked our history, our land, and our language.